then just also this comment on organizations and sex workers lacking organization. Again, I promise you with all of me that sex workers are an extremely organized group. While the numbers of sex workers themselves may be very hard to document for all of the reasons that Josie was naming, including folks being pushed underground and marginalized, numbers of sex worker rights defenders are actually a bit easier to access. And so we do have quite a bit of documentation about the sex worker rights defender organizations that are operating at the local level, at the regional level, at the national level, at the international level, because these are the groups who guided this research. It is not possible to do the work that they do, like emergency response and legal counseling, public health advocacy, the hotlines, the toll-free hotlines that they run. It's not possible to do this work without extreme organization. And to do this in the context of criminalization makes it that much more obvious how effective their organizations are. Thank you.
Perhaps a question from this end. And the question is, are you...
I had hands. The lady there, you had a question.
So, Emmeline. So, ever since 2020, when the curfew was implemented, sex workers started working. In the previous years, they used to work mostly outside. So has the curfew affected your work as sex workers? Because again, so has it affected your business?
I've got two questions. My name is Mori Tereta from St. One is, your table over there is gender insensitive. Do we have male sex workers? And also, in your report, Madam Erina, did you meet some of them and what were their responses? And in some other countries in the world over, we've got countries where sex work has been legalized. Do we foresee a future in Kenya where this trade will be legalized? The future of sex working in the country?
Now you can.
Perhaps as a redundant question, on the question on legality, I think the institution of sex work has been with us for the longest time. I think 2,000, 1,000 years plus. Is there any bill that you are perhaps pushing as African Sex Work Alliance to our parliament to actually make your trade actually legal? And question number two, are you ready to pay tax?
So, Ghetto Radio, thank you so much for your question. So, prior to this report, Frontline Defenders also did another report on the impact of COVID on the lives of sex workers, and that is also on our website. So, COVID impacted everyone, but there are sections of communities that were highly impacted by COVID and by laws such as curfew, like the dusk to dawn curfew that has been imposed and was imposed in several countries. I can tell you for a fact that the establishments where sex workers work from were closed down, and therefore they had to go back to their homes, where they experience additional violence, possibly from community or even their partners or even families who didn't know of their identity as sex workers. So when they leave their houses to go and work in these other establishments that operate in the night, your neighbor doesn't know that you're a sex worker. So with the curfew, there was a huge impact on the lives of sex workers. And obviously, even the amount of money that they would make per day significantly went down. Institutions such as the Kenya Sex Worker Alliance organized very wonderfully to have food relief and to provide PPEs and to provide other essential services for sex workers because of the scare of going to a public healthcare facilities and to catch COVID that you would then transmit to your clients. So yes, that's what I would say about that. thank you for the Times. Thank you for pointing out about our gender insensitive panel. um, yes, there are hundreds of male sex workers and there are hundreds of transgender sex workers. And Erin will speak about how it is with that. On the issue of legalization, I will let Grace and Caroline speak to this.
So there are many countries that have legalized sex work, but as sex workers, we don't push for legalization. We push for decriminalization. We push for decriminalization of sex work because there are many modeling research that has been done of legalization and decriminalization. And as sex workers, we've seen that decriminalization has more advantages than legalization. I want to talk about decriminalization because that is what we as sex workers believe in. Decriminalization, we see that when sex work is decriminalized, the rights of sex workers will be upheld. Sex workers will be able to work. Also, infections among sex workers will go down. So we push for decriminalization, and there are many, not even a bill. We don't have a bill in place, but there are many campaigns across the African sex worker movements that we work with. For example, in Southern Africa, they are working very closely with the parliament and they have written out some of the things that they want the parliament to pass to decriminalize sex work. And we have seen a lot of positive gains in Southern Africa, where we have seen about 2 months ago, we were in a panel together with the president of South Africa, who's pushing for decriminalization of sex work. So that is one of the things. In Kenya, the Kenya Sex Workers Alliance is doing the public interest litigation. So the Kenya Sex Workers Alliance have already started the process of going to court to take the government to court so that they can decriminalize or they can remove the penal code that exists in the constitution so that sex work can be decriminalized. We have also seen in countries like Zimbabwe where sex workers have pushed for petty offenses being removed. And we have seen that if petty offenses are removed in some of the countries, sex work is being practiced freely and it's safe. Also in Kenya, we have a bill through the ICJ, it's called the International Justice. Yes, ICJ, which is pushing also for the removal of the petty offenses in Kenya. And so these are some of the things that are happening, and there are many campaigns that we can share with you that are happening across Africa and across different countries, even in Kenya, what we are doing. Are we ready to pay taxes? I say that we have we pay taxes, tunanunua unga, tumeandikwa makazi, tuna shop kwa supermarket, tuko na side hustles, organization that tunafanyia kazi zinalipa taxes, we are tax compliant. So if we decriminalize sex work and the government agrees to our demands, we can talk that time.
Thank you for your question about.
Yes.
I appreciate the question about gender. There are a number of reasons that the genders of this panel are not as diverse as we would have liked. COVID being one of them, security precautions being another one. There are various reasons that it's either safe or not safe for different human rights defenders to be public about the work that they do. These women already have a pretty high profile in Kenya and have chosen to be visible leaders of their movements, and others have not necessarily done so or been able to do so. We did have a global launch of the report about 2 weeks ago, in which more of our speakers were transgender human rights defenders, for example. But again, I see you, I appreciate you, it was a great comment. In terms of the research in the report, yes, it did speak to female sex workers, gay male sex workers, and transgender sex workers. All of the transgender sex workers, I would say with the exception of maybe 2 that I spoke to, identified as trans women. There were significantly fewer trans men that I spoke to, and that has a lot to do with the invisibilization of trans men globally, so that's a slightly larger issue, possibly for a different conversation. But in terms of different risks that they face, there is actually a chapter in the report, Chapter 5, deals with physical presentation, stereotypes, and HRD security. And this deals specifically with the risks that are faced by transgender women who are sex workers and the ways in which their bodies are read effectively as walking crimes all day long. So we had some really interesting conversations in El Salvador, for example, with a group of cisgendered female sex workers and transgendered women sex workers who were talking about the impact of criminalization on their work. And so whereas some of the cisgendered female sex workers were talking about how this law particularly affected them while they were selling sex, the trans women came in to say, actually this law affects me all day long, because when people look at me, they read a transgender woman as automatically probably someone who sells sex. And we are policed and harassed 24 hours a day accordingly. So there are a number of violations that transgender human rights defenders face that intersect with their gender. Similarly, male sex workers potentially could face more often accusations of promoting homosexuality in addition to promoting prostitution. So we have a number of cases in the report from Tanzania, for example, where a human rights defender is leading a human rights training for a group of sex workers, and when the police raid it and arrest everyone there, the defender gets accused not only of promoting prostitution, but simply because he is known to be a gay man, also of promoting homosexuality. So there's sort of a layering of offenses and potential criminal charges that comes with the identity. So we would never sort of rank the violations that one group faces above another. We don't rank human rights violations in that way, but we would differentiate among them. And the last point that I would make is that when groups of defenders are arrested, where you have gay men, cisgendered women, and transgender women, for example, arrested together, police in Tanzania have been known to use tactics aimed at eroding the solidarity between those groups. So, for example, they would demand different types of sex acts from trans women than they would from cisgendered female sex workers, for example, knowing that one group has kids at home and one group probably doesn't. And one group may be more likely to submit because they have kids at home, and one group probably doesn't. And those things are aimed at eroding solidarity, knowing that one group has a child at home to feed, so they may be more likely to submit to some kind of corruption to get home to feed their kids. This is the kind of horrific violence that sex worker rights defenders are facing, and we can see it differentiated along these lines.
Enough. Goodwill. Goodwill.
Thank you.
Goodwill.